Hello, this is Josh Patel, and today I'm bringing you another biology lesson. Today we will be learning Chapter 3, Cell Structure and Function, Lesson 4, Diffusion and Osmosis. So our key concept for today is materials move across a membrane because of a concentration difference. And a concentration difference is basically just the difference between the two concentrations of each side of whatever you're talking about. So in this case we're talking about, as you can see, if you recognize this picture, which you should, this is a cell membrane. It has two phospholipids on each side, making a phospholipid bilayer, which bi is two, and phospholipid is a type of lipid, which we learned, which makes up the cell membrane. So the concentration difference is just the difference in the amount of concentration on both sides. So this outside region has a high concentration, while the inside has a low concentration. So that's the difference, the concentration difference. So we're going to learn about something called passive diffusion, which is the movement of molecules from a high concentration to low concentration. That's why the arrow is pointing inside, because outside has a high concentration, inside has a low concentration. So passive transportation does not require energy input from a cell. So it's without energy, it requires no energy, it's just natural. So molecules can move across the cell membrane through passive transportation. So passive transport requires no energy, and it's from high to low. So there are two types of passive transportation: diffusion and osmosis, which we will learn today. So diffusion and osmosis are types of passive transport. Molecules diffuse down a concentration difference. So this is the definition of diffusion. It's molecules moving down a concentration gradient. So when they say down a concentration gradient, they mean from a high concentration to low concentration, because it's going downwards. It's going from high to low. High has more and then low has less. So it always moves from a concentration of high to low. That's the definition of diffusion. And then osmosis is the diffusion of water molecules across a semi-permeable membrane. So osmosis always has to do with water, while diffusion can be any molecule, including water. So osmosis can go from high to low or low to high, because water is special and it moves across the semi-permeable membrane, which is the cell membrane, and cell membrane allows water to flow freely most of the time. So water is just special and it can go in and out way easier than other molecules. That's why it has its own name, osmosis. And it always has to be a semi-permeable membrane. So there are three types of solutions. So this is where it gets a little complicated. So isotonic, hypertonic, and hypotonic. So really pay attention here because this part's a little confusing. So isotonic, since it's not hypo or hyper, it must be like the equal one or the basic one. So a solution is isotonic to a cell if it has the same concentration of solutes as the cell. Equal amounts of water enter and exit the cell, so the cell stays a constant size. So if it's isotonic, the both sides of the membrane have equal amounts of solutes. And as we learned, solutes are what is dissolved in the substance. So the solute would be, let's give an example, it would be salt. So salt's the solute, and then water is the solvent, or your blood. Well, let's just say water. So salt, there's equal amount of salt inside and outside. That's why water flows the same throughout. And in this next one, we're going to talk about a hypertonic solution. Hyper means like more, and hypo is less. So hypertonic must mean more of something. So a hypertonic solution has more solutes. So it has more solutes. Solutes is what is dissolved, so the molecules or salt. Overall, more water exits the cell in a hypertonic solution, causing the cell to shrivel up or even die. So we want an isotonic, but sometimes we get hypertonic. So hypertonic, let's say the solution, so the outside of the cell is hypertonic. So that means the outside part has more molecules, which means it must have less water. Because if it has more of the solute, it has less of the solvent, which is water. So hypertonic has less water. So the solution is containing less water than inside the cell. So the inside of the cell is hypotonic, which means it has few molecules or salt, but it has way more water. So water always flows, or diffusion always goes from high to low. So the water inside will easily just flow out into the solution. So that's why the cell shrivels up, because all the water just goes out into the solution. So it has no water left and it just shrivels up and dies. Now we're going to learn about a hypotonic solution, how it affects the cell. So a hypotonic, hypo is less, so has fewer solutes than a cell. So the outside has less salt crystals than the inside. So overall, more water enters a cell in a hypotonic solution, causing causing the cell to expand or even burst. So the outside is hypotonic, which means it has less of the salt and more water. So let's just think about the water. The outside, more water. Inside is hypertonic, so it has less water. So the water is going to want to flow from high to low. So the water from outside goes into the cell, and the cell has to expand to accommodate all the water coming in, and eventually it'll burst. And so you might be wondering, why don't the molecules or the salt crystals just move in and out? But it's because water and the semipermeable membrane like cooperate together, and so water can easily flow in or out. But the other molecules, it takes a little time. It's just harder for them. So it's easier for water to flow. So that's why the water is the one moving. So some molecules can only diffuse through a transport protein. So some molecules cannot easily diffuse across the cell membrane. So it's facilitated through a trans transport protein. So facilitated diffusion is diffusion through a transport protein. So this is an example of facilitated diffusion. So special molecules, if they're too big or awkward and they don't easily pass through, they have to be facilitated through a transport protein. So these molecules are being facilitated by this protein, which helps passage through to the inside of the cell, and it's still going from high to low, so it's still a passive diffusion. So that's the end of this video on Chapter 3, Cell Structure and Function, Lesson 4, Diffusion and Osmosis. Hopefully you understand everything, but if you missed anything, make sure you go back and review, especially the hypo, hyper, and isotonic solutions. Make sure you listen to that one more time. And our next video will be on Chapter 3, which is Cell Structure and Function, Lesson 5, which is all about active transport, endocytosis, and exocytosis. So you might be wondering what they are, so make sure you watch the next video. And good luck in your quest in biology.